Well, I'm going to be real short now because you spoiled the ending for me. Why Saratoga, the battles, plural, were such an important part of our American history. How many of you, I always say, you got to be participating here. I always involve my group. So how many of you have ever been to the, I don't need that. All right, good, thank you very much. How many of you have ever been to the Saratoga battlefield? How many people here? Okay, now inside your program, you see that picture on the left? Do you know what that is? That's the Saratoga Monument. It's in Schuylerville, the Battle Victory Monument. Has anyone ever been there? Been up to the top of that? Nobody's climbed the stairs? Oh, good. I'm the only one here that's done it. It's a beautiful view from up there. It's almost 300 feet up, so it's all stairs all the way around this thing, going all the way up to the top of it. So Saratoga. I have a few questions to ask. My card blew away. What a surprise. I gotta use my memory here. How many of you know why Saratoga was such a great, pivotal part of American history? Spoiled it for us, so, right?
Nobody was actually listening.
They weren't listening anyway. That's good. So when you think of the battles of Saratoga, who comes to mind? I love that. I come in and I see Benedict Arnold. No, why is he on there? Well, we're going to get to that. Don't spoil that part either. But why would you think George Washington wouldn't be there, or Nathaniel Greene, or Henry Knox, or some of these folks? Why weren't they on the picture here that she made?
Because they weren't at the battle.
They weren't there. So who was the commander of the Battle of Saratoga for the Patriot forces then?
Gates.
Well, this guy named Horatio Gates. Okay. Who was the commanding officer for the British forces?
John Burgoyne.
John Burgoyne. Now, Burgoyne, didn't that sound French? He was British. How in the world did they ever meet? You've been to Saratoga. Why? You've been there. It's on the country. It's on the Hudson River, but it's out in the middle of kind of like nowhere. How come these two great forces met here? What was the reason? Like the Civil War, Gettysburg. Why were they there? Well, there was rumor they were there to get shoes, and one army came from the north, one came from the south, and this town happened to be where they met. Well, that's not the same idea as why the battles of Saratoga took place. John Burgoyne had a plan. Actually, the year before, in 1776, a man named Guy Carleton. Have you ever heard of him?
Yep.
Guy Carleton was a commanding leader of the Canadian part of the British forces. William Howe was a commanding leader of everything else. Once you get past Canada, everything else north, south of there, he was in command of. Well, Guy Carleton decided he was going to come down and hit a big city on the Hudson River. And you know what that city was?
Albany.
Albany was a big city at that point. It was a big city for an objective for the British and their forces because during the French and Indian War, that was a key point. The waterways during this time period were crucial. There was no highways, the thruway wasn't there, there was no northern expressway. So the waters were the ways of travel. You could go from New York City up the Hudson River to Albany and get on the Mohawk River, head west, all the way to Rome, take the Oneida Carrying Place. Anybody ever been to Rome, Fort Stanwix? The Oneida Carrying Place is that dry area between the Mohawk River and Wood Creek, where they'd have to portage their canoes. Once you get on Wood Creek, you could take your boat up to Oneida Lake, from Oneida Lake to Oswego River up to Lake Ontario, and from there you could go all the way out west on Lake Erie. You could hit all of them. So this was a key waterway. So in 1776, Guy Carleton knew this, and he wanted to come down, and he wanted to take Albany. Well, he ran into a little resistance on Lake Champlain. And what was that battle called? Right?
Well, Ticonderoga.
Yeah. The island.
Well, Valcour.
He was heading for Ticonderoga, and this battle took place. And there was a guy that's on our picture, Benedict Arnold, who built boats in a place called Steensboro, New York. Anybody ever heard of Steensboro? Doesn't exist anymore, right? Called Whitehall now. That's where he built these boats, these ships, and he gave resistance to Carleton and his British forces. Now, some would say that slowed Carleton up enough that he decided, to heck with this, I'm not going to try and go down to Albany. I'm not going to try and go down to New York City. I'm just going to retreat back to Canada. Well, that's not really true because this was in October, Anyone who's lived in New York State long enough knows in October, November, what happens?
Winter.
Get some good weather, right? So he decided to never mind and went back up. Well, a year later, Burgoyne, John Burgoyne, and by the way, Gentleman Johnny, you've heard that before? Was that a nickname given to him while he was still alive?
No.
No, that was something that wasn't given until actually the early 20th century by an author called him Gentleman Johnny. So every time you watch a documentary or read a book or something about John Burgoyne, it's always Gentleman Johnny. He was never known by that one in his lifetime. He came up with a plan. He went to King George III in England. He wanted to initiate this plan. Now, when you read about the battles of Saratoga, you read this too. There was this great plan, right? One army was going to come from Canada down. Another army is going to come from Canada down through Oneida Lake and Anamoc, and then going to head east, and they're going to converge on Albany. Along with another force, William Howe is going to come up from New York City, and all three of these forces are going to converge, and they're going to take Albany, because in that day and age, the capital was the city you wanted to get. Sadly, that's not true. What happened was Burgoyne had his army come down. St. Leger came down from the south, or from the northwest. They were to meet up at Albany, and from there they were to relate what happened. We made it, now what do? Are we going to take Rhode Island? Are we going to go to Boston? What are we going to do? Could Philadelphia be in the mix? They didn't know at the time. It was an open-ended plan. There was none of this three-way prong attack that was going to take Albany. It was two-pronged, whatever happens, then we decide what we're going to do next. Okay, so Burgoyne comes down. Now, the two battles, it's a long siege. It starts in June of 1777. And I could be here till, what time is it? I could be here till 5 o'clock and I still wouldn't even scratch the surface. So I'm just going to give an overview, a lot of things that I think are important. So he's coming down. And this whole campaign started in June of 1777. Now, there's a lot of little facets that go along with this campaign. It's not just the single two battles of Saratoga. And I'm not going to go in chronological order and tell you everything that happened, but have you ever heard of Bennington, Vermont? Yeah. The Battle of Bennington, where was that fought?
New York State.
Not in Bennington, Vermont. It was fought in Walloomsac, New York. Bennington was the storehouse for the Northern Army, one of the big storehouses. And Burgoyne knew that they had this storehouse here. And he sent a man named Frederick Baum and his army to go and to take these stores, take their food, take their ammunition things in Bennington, Vermont. Well, the guy, a great guy from the state of New Hampshire, you ever seen New Hampshire license plate?
Oh, yeah.
The motto?
Live free or die.
Live free or die. So who said that? Why is it on there? John Stark coined that phrase. It was long after the American Revolution took place. John Stark was he didn't belong to the Continental Army. He belonged to my state of New Hampshire. What he said. I listened to my representative in New Hampshire. I don't listen to George Washington. I'm not part of the Continental Army. He was told by Benjamin Lincoln to go and help in New York State. He's like, I'm protecting Vermont. Which at the time was called what? It wasn't Vermont. It was the New Hampshire Grants. And we can go into that. I have a flag over here, which is probably blown off into the woods by now. The green flag here.
Yes, sir.
It's here. Now you know what that flag is, right? I can tell you it's the official flag of Vermont, but they would kill me because that was proposed at one point. That is the Green Mountain Boys flag, which Green Mountain Boys were from New Hampshire. They wanted to do that as their flag for the state flag, but they didn't want that. So John Stark I work for them. I don't work for him. So he said, I know they're coming. And when they came, he met them in this place, Walloomsac, New York, along the Walloomsac River. And it's on a hilltop. Have you ever been to the Bennington battlefield? Nobody's ever been to Bennington battlefield? Yeah. Okay, so it's it's a small battlefield. It's like the size of this lawn here. And there's a hill on top where the cannons, of course, you always want the high ground for the cannons, fire down, and we'll get to that at the battles of Saratoga as well. And he wiped out Frederick Baum. What kind of language is that? What nation?
German.
German. There were hardly any British at this battle, as far as the British side. They were mostly, and I learned this in school, as you said, I learned when I grew up, and I always learned that when you find out about the Germans who fought in the Revolution, what do they call them? Hessians, right?
Well, they were from
Part
Hessen.
of them were Hessians. They were from Hessen-Hanau, a province of Germany. But there were also another group of Germans, Brunswickers, Braunschweigers, who came from Braunschweig, and they were the guys that rode horses. And they came over here, they were paid to fight, paid mercenaries, whatever you want to call them. They were paid by Britain to come fight and beat the colonists. Well, these guys had horses, so they came over to the colonies thinking we're going to have horses. So what do they have? They had these huge riding boots that go up past their knees, the long coats. They had their hats that were pointy like this. You ever see those hats? And they get off the boat with their saddles tucked under their arms saying, "Where's our horses?"
No horses.
They said it in German. No horses. They carried their saddles for quite a while. Anyway, we're not getting horses. So they finally deposited the saddles wherever, but they still had this terrible outfit to walk and to march in July and into August, which August 16th is the Battle of Bennington. Well, they got pretty much either killed or taken captive. There was nobody that escaped, not even Frederick Baum. He was the commander, but he got shot in the stomach, and he died 2 days later. Imagine getting shot in the stomach in 1777, put in a wagon, bump, 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 nice cushions, and pillows and shots, and taken to a house where he died 2 days later. He told them, "I'm just kill me now, just take my life." But you can't imagine the pain of being shot. There's nothing they can do. They can't amputate his stomach. And amputations were not a big thing during the Revolutionary War anyway. So he died. Battle of Bennington is won by that delayed Burgoyne by 1 full month. August 16th, the Battle of Saratoga. First battle didn't take place until September 19th. So this is over a month he's been delayed. Finally he gets his forces moving. But there's other battles mixed in there too I can tell you about. Battle of Hubbardton, Vermont, the only battle ever fought in Vermont. Northern Vermont, right across from where Fort Ticonderoga is, across the Hudson. Then there's a battle that's even closer than that to us in Rome, New York, is Fort Stanwix. Just east of there is the Oriskany battlefield. Anyone ever been to the Oriskany battlefield? All right, so that battle was part of that campaign too. That was Barry St. Ledger coming down, wanted to take Fort Schuyler, or Fort Stanwix as it's known. And he sieged it for a couple of weeks, then realized this isn't going to work because Nicholas Herkimer came with his men and pushed them back, and St. Ledger said, "Forget it, I'm not coming." Boom, back up to Canada he went. Then there was another force that was supposed to have been coming up, General Clinton. Now the Clintons were all over the place on both sides. And Clinton was supposed to come up and he even notified Burgoyne saying, "I'm coming up to help you." And he never made it that far. He stopped at the just south of West Point, Fort Montgomery, and Fort Clinton were there. There were 2 battles there that were part of this campaign. So there was all these little battles that spurred off from this whole campaign that are really important. So here comes Burgoyne down with his army. Now, when they were coming down, they were coming right by the Hudson River. Not an ideal place. It was easier to travel, but up on the hill where the Battle of Saratoga were taking place, it's called Demas's Heights, on the high ground. But they saw that Horatio Gates had his cannons up there. So we can't go down this way, we're going to be right in the line of fire. So they had to go up, and they had to go up over top of that hill to get to Albany. And they tried, and they get there. They get up on top of the hill and they start going. Now, another thing you might read. Horatio Gates, the guy on the card here, BA, I call him the original BA. Remember the show, The A-Team?
Yes.
BA, that's the original BA. Baracus. Benedict Arnold was BA. Him and Horatio Gates, this is what you read in an account, right? First battle is, like I said, I can go into all the details of what happened during the first battle. The British technically won the battle because they held the field after nightfall, but they lost so many men, that less men than the Patriots lost. But it's called a Pyrrhic victory. They won it on the paper, but... So what would you think they'd do the next day? They would reinitiate the fight and push the columns back farther south, get down to your objective, remember, Albany. No, they just stopped and they went and they camped. Burgoyne had his men camped. He's waiting for Clinton to come up from New York City now. So you read these accounts. After the first battle on September 19th, Horatio Gates, Benedict Arnold, they worked great together during different Belcourt Island and different things in 76. 77, they can't stand each other now after this battle. Because Benedict Arnold engaged all of his men. He was second in command. He engaged all his men in the first battle. Then he went to Gates and said, "Hey, give me some more men." And Gates pulled out his sword and said, "I'm in command of this army and I'll determine what happens here." So that squelched Benedict Arnold. So then, years later, you get these accounts. Benedict Arnold mad at Gates. Gates is mad at Arnold. So Gates tells Arnold, "Go to your tent, take a time. I'm putting Benjamin Lincoln in command instead of you." Benjamin Lincoln was second in command there. He was one of the men, and if you study Benedict Arnold's life, Benjamin Lincoln was promoted up to Brigadier General in February of 76. Benedict Arnold didn't get promoted until May of 76, so he's actually inferior to Benjamin Lincoln, which he shouldn't have been. He should have been promoted earlier, which is this whole mess that happens after this. And then the second battle. Now, the army of the British, Burgoyne's army, if you go to Saratoga, you can go, it's a huge field. This is where the British camped for 2.5 weeks. Now, when I say the army, it wasn't just the army. Who else was here with them? Now, it wasn't uncommon in those days for the soldiers' wives and families to travel with the army. That's what they did here, as well as the generals' families, the officers' families, and their children, and all this. Plus, they had a huge camp down by the Hudson River where all their stores were tested. They had their boats on the river, the bateaus, how they didn't carry everything in wagons. Some things were wagons, most of them were in bateaus. They had to travel. So you had all these people, 2.5 weeks, getting food to them. So what do you think happens after 2.5 weeks? Clinton's not coming. He doesn't know that, but Clinton's gone back to New York City. Burgoyne says, we are starving here. So he sends out his soldiers. Now, you soldiers now, take your guns, but you're not going to be soldiers today. What are you going to be? Farmers. You're going to go out, and they found wheat fields. And they went out, and they took the guns off, and they went and sat, and they plucked wheat, and they made bread, and they didn't do the bread. They took the wheat, and they ground it, but it was sustenance. It wasn't anything fancy. You didn't have a sub like we had today. They had just enough to sustain the army and their men. Well, while they were out there, it always happens, it's hilarious how many battles start because somebody's gun goes off. So of course they have reconnoitering, you have a line here, and then another half mile back, have more reconnoitering. You don't go send everybody up to the main line saying, hey, where's the enemy? Oh, they're all right here, and then you get overwhelmed. They send a few guys up, and eventually one of the British guns goes off. Boom! Well, we know where they are then. And we know we've seen them moving around. They're either on the move, they're not retreating, they're coming towards us. Okay, so now Benedict Arnold goes, and this is where the whole story gets confused with him because, and I'll explain this afterward, why it's all confused. Him and Gates, this is the story you'll read. This is the fictional story, right? Gates puts him in a tent. Some say Benedict Arnold was so discouraged he got drunk, was in his tent waiting. The British come, they overwhelm the Patriots. Patriots retreat. Benedict Arnold comes out of his tent and says, what's going on? Oh, they're whipping up. Nope, not going to happen. He runs out, steals a horse, gets on his horse. Come on, boys! They follow him, they go up. Second day, second battle of Venus's Heights. Goes up, goes around the Braunschweigers, the Brunswicks, wipes them out, gets shot, falls off his horse falls on him. And the battle's over. The British, Germans, they surrender, and the end of the battle. But that's not what happened. Not all of it. Years later, you ever go to Saratoga and there's this trail, right? It's called the Wilkinson Trail, right? I don't know, you can say you trust me, right? It's called the Wilkinson Trail. Now, for those of you who haven't been there and want to go there, I have maps of the battlefield that the National Park Service gives. So if you're interested in going, I will give you one. But it's called the Wilkinson Trail. Well, in 1816, a man named James Wilkinson, who was named after, who wasn't even there, got this secondhand from Henry Dearborn. You ever hear of Dearborn, Michigan?
Yep.
That's where he named after him. He relayed to James Wilkinson, this is what happened at the Second Battle of Saratoga. But every time Dearborn mentioned Benedict Arnold did this, Benedict Arnold did this, James Wilkinson inserted his name into what happened. And then he twisted it that Horatio Gates hated Benedict Arnold, he wasn't in command, I did this. And it's not what happened. Now, how do I know that? I'm not making this up. Trust me, you can look into it. Eric Schnitzer. Mark, he's the chief historian at Saratoga. I have a book up here that he wrote called Campaign to Saratoga. Don Troiani, the great Revolutionary War artist, did the pictures in it. Well, Schnitzer got this 20 years ago, or 10 years ago, 2016, somebody told, hey, there's something on eBay you might be interested in. It's called the Bachelor Letter. Not a bachelor like a guy, but a bachelor like the man's name. Bachelor Letter, what's that? So he went and looked it up. He didn't get the letter. A friend of his got it, but he knew I had the contents of it. And this is what it basically says. He's right back to his wife, this man, October 9th, 1777, so 2 days after the Second Battle of Saratoga. He was an adjutant in the New Hampshire Regiment. And he said, I am going to relate to you what my eyes have seen and my ears have heard. I love that language back then, how they write to the, 2 days after the battle, those guys write to me. Well, they were coming from New Hampshire and they get to Saratoga. Well, what's the first thing you do when you get to a place, a battlefield? You don't just start getting your gun and whipping it out and shooting anybody. You got to go to your divisional headquarters. Well, that's Benedict Arnold. So he goes to Benedict Arnold's headquarters, and while he's coming up, he hears Benedict Arnold. Now, the Nielsen Farm, right? Benedict Saratoga, that red building, the Nielsen Farm up on, that's original. That was there at the time, and we were there a couple of weeks ago, and we went, and you look at it, and the monument there, because this is put in the late 1800s, headquarter of Enoch Poor. And then he gives it support to Joseph Silly, James Scammell, these guys. That was Benedict Arnold's headquarters. His name's not on there. But this bachelor went there, and he's going to meet, and he's hearing something as he's going. Gates and him are talking. And one of the markers there they put in 2 years ago says, at the top of it, give me some men, and we will see what fun we can have with them before the sun goes down. And Gates said, great idea. This time he's given him his men. So he gave Benedict Arnold these men to take and to go into battle with. And then the truth part comes out where Benedict Arnold takes his men. They go up with Raymond's radar, go behind the lines. The Germans, like these French with these helmets, their pants, they're gone. These guys are probably 800 degrees under there. It's a hot day in August, September, now it's October, but it's still hot that day. And basically get overwhelmed. Like I said, Benedict Arnold did get shot from saying the leg. He got shot actually in his ankle, same ankle he was shot in Ticonderoga a couple years earlier. The horse does fall on him. He's pinned. Guy that shot him, the guys that Benedict Arnold's men are getting ready to shoot him, and Benedict Arnold said, hold it, don't shoot him, that man's only doing his duty. So they took him prisoner. So poor Benedict Arnold lay on the ground with a horse on him. They get him out. Take him down to the Hudson River, put him in a bateau, and they sent him down to Albany. Well, Burgoyne's army knows they're beat now. They can't go any farther, so they go into retreat mode. The day after the battle, it rains like crazy, and they're trying to get up back to Canada. And where the Battle of Saratoga took place is really the town of Stillwater. Schuylerville, where that monument is, that was Saratoga at the time. That's why it's called the Battle of Saratoga. The Battle of Saratoga wasn't fought in Saratoga, but you go to Schuylerville now, and that's where the British entrenched. They were going to siege the town, and they did for about 3 days. And they had cannons, and they were shooting back and forth. Well, the Patriots had cannons. They brought some, but they got a lot more that the British left behind. If you go there, you can see the actual cannon tubes, and 2 of them in a cabinet, and one's on a caisson there that were actually taken off that battlefield from the British after they retreated. So it's really neat. This isn't just a picture in a book or something. You can go actually see these cannon tubes that were there at the time, probably at the Battle of Venus's Heights. So they sieged the village, the town of Schuylerville, Saratoga at the time. Well, what do you think happened with those poor people that are, sitting around waiting all that time, these soldiers? Remember what happened in 1755, 1758, 1763? What was going on then?
French and Indian.
French and Indian War. Or if you're from England or Europe, it's the 7 Years' War. Well, one of the men there, who was a patriot at this time, fought for the British during the French and Indian War. Everybody that fought on our side fought for the British. Now we're fighting the British. Right? So he's there. His name is Asahel Terrell. And he's regaling the men back during the French and Indian War. This is what happened. And this is talking about the Battle of Lake George, where Fort William Henry is. And he's regaling them with what's going on, and all of a sudden, boom! And the men said his head was just gone. And you wonder what that looked like. Well, this is in a diary somebody wrote. Joseph Plum Martin wasn't the guy. Do you remember Joseph Plum Martin? He wrote the diary of Valley Forge, in depth, every day, what was going on. Well, this guy that wrote this about this incident wrote 2 pages on this, what happened to this poor guy. And there was a man sitting so close to him that when they applied for, and then this is 1783, the war ended, right? They didn't get pensions till early 1800s. And his pension record said, loss of left eye due to skull fragment. Oh. They said, yeah, and that's just one of many that got killed that way with cannons. And it was a clean amputation. Boom, gone. And this guy had 5, 6 children. And the interesting thing is, if you look at the number of men, I should say boys, who fought here, well, they've done research under the ages of these men. Now, the majority of the men that fought at Saratoga were not, even though it was in New York State, there were hardly any New York State groups there. Majority were from, what do you think?
New England.
What do you think? Connecticut, I heard. What about the other big state?
Massachusetts.
Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and Connecticut, the majority of the men here. Vermont didn't have any men there because Vermont was not a state yet. That's one of my questions. Which one of these colonies was not a colony? Which one of the states was not a colony? And then one of the answers would have been, the choices would have been Vermont. How many of you would have said Vermont was not a colony during the original 13 colonies? It wasn't. It was the 14th colony originally. Vermont was its own state from 1777 until 1791. It was its own sovereign nation in there because of all the stuff that was going on with the New Hampshire grants. The New Hampshireites thought they owned the land. New Yorkers thought they owned the land because King George told them at one point, New Hampshire, you can go all the way to the Hudson River. Then he told them a few years later, New Yorkers, you can go all the way to the Connecticut River, which separates Vermont and New Hampshire. So they both thought they owned that little area, New Hampshire grant, which is now the state of Vermont. So that was never, Vermont was not one of the original colonies. But they did studies on who was fighting there, and they had the great thing they were, because New York didn't keep such good records during that time, but the New England states kept great records. Who fought? So you have one guy in the 60s that was there, a few in the 50s. The lower you go, the more, right? So we get to 20, right? 20-year-olds, they had some. 19, 18, 17, 16-year-olds were the majority of the men. Now you see these pictures, they're always adult men. Like me, I would have been a rarity fighting during that battle. I might have been a leader, or one of the generals, or a colonel or something, but as far as the fighting men, there were few of them that were my age or in that area. I'm only 27, I know it's hard to believe, but 16-year-olds fighting for what? Because somebody's coming on my land? What were they fighting for? Freedom, right? They were under a tyrannical government, right? They wanted to get their freedom from the British. 60-year-old kids today, what do you think? Would they be doing the same thing? Would a 26-year-old be?
No.
You know, you think about it, the maturity of people back then was just amazing. 16-year-olds, they were men. And they were fighting like men. And they were dying like men. And if you ever go there, especially up where Freeman's farm is in that area, John Freeman, that's why it's named after him, Freeman's farm, was a loyalist or a royalist. Because if you say loyalist, that kind of, yes, and people know the history, they think a loyalist, they're loyal to Britain. But wait a minute, well, I'm a loyalist, I'm loyal to George Washington, the Continental Army, the Patriots, right? So royalist, you're loyal to the royal, you're loyal to the crown. Well, he became a royalist, and he went up north, he was going to meet Burgoyne's army and join them, and him and his son. And they never had to go far because George Burgoyne's army was coming down. And where do you think John Freeman ended up fighting at? Right on my land. If you go there, there's no structures there now, but the house was here, barn was over here, there's his fields. This is all Freeman's farm at this point. So he's coming back to this land knowing he's never going to own it again. Because what happens if you're a loyalist or a royalist? Just ask John Johnson, right? Johnstown. What did they do with him and his family?
Kicked them out.
They sieged his property and they booted him out, put him in jail. So he knew, John Freeman, this is the land, yeah, it was mine, but it's not anymore because for whatever reason, and that's a presentation I'll be giving in September in Sydney about loyalties, divided loyalties. Which side would you have been on? Nicholas Herkimer, Battle of Oriskany, the leader, the German, the Palatine German. He got criticized for taking his time getting to help at Stanwix because his brother was fighting for St. Ledger. You talk about, the Civil War, brother against brother. This was, the Revolutionary War was the original brother against brother, neighbor against neighbor, cousins, friends, somebody you've grown up with, and now you're facing them, and that happened a lot. There's accounts of somebody saying, hey, you're on the wrong side. I grew up with you. And I have no qualms about popping you off because you are fighting against me. Happened all the time with these kids that grew up with best friends and they end up shooting and killing each other. So the battle's done, right? Siege is done. Then they have their surrender. Actually, it wasn't called a surrender. It was a convention of Saratoga. Yeah. And there were stipulations that were made that these men, some of the men were allowed to go, but the Germans and some of the others were put in prison, put in jail. They were going to be taken to Cambridge, Massachusetts, and put on ships, and prison ships. And with the stipulation that these men who are being let go back to England, go back to Scotland, wherever you're coming from, don't get back involved in this war. Well, there's a letter that John Burgoyne actually wrote to William Howe saying he had no intention of doing that. I have all the intention of recycling these men. If a patriot got killed from New Hampshire, how easy is it to get some other 15, 16, 18-year-old kid to come and say, hey, you want to, hey, all right, patriot, I'm going to join. You lose a British soldier or a German, they're not in your backyard. You got to go across the pond, right? To get them to replace someone, it's a long, arduous process. So we're not going to send them back. We're going to cycle them back now. Maybe they won't fight in New York, but hey, Virginia, Georgia, North Carolina, there were wars going on, or battles going on down in those states too. They never know that these guys were even here. So this convention, this surrender was, in fact, the first surrender of a British army in world history, though, by John Burgoyne. Which John Burgoyne wasn't even there. He actually had one of his representatives go and accept the sword, and he gave it back to him anyway. But that's there. There's a place called where the surrender took place, and then there's Victory Woods, and then there's this monument you can go to. So now, Benedict Arnold, right? He's on the picture. I got to talk about him because he's on the card there. Plus, I love talking about him. He is on a boat now getting sent to Albany, right? The hospital in Albany. Because Albany's been there a long time. They got a huge area there, and he's in the hospital. They know where he is. Well, he's corresponding back with, who do you think? Who loved Benedict Arnold? Come on.
Washington.
Father of our country. George Washington and Benedict Arnold were so close. So remember I mentioned that Benjamin Lincoln, St. Clair, he was second in command under Gates. These men were promoted, 5 men were promoted back on February 19th, 1776. Well, he wasn't one because Connecticut, where Benedict Arnold was from, had too many generals already. So he was not given the commission as one. Well, Washington couldn't believe this. He just came, So eventually he got him where he could. He became a brigadier general, but it was in May. Well, I'm still under these guys. I'm 3 months later or whatever. I'm still under Benjamin Lincoln and Arthur St. Clair and these other guys. Have you ever heard of these other guys? I mentioned Benjamin Lincoln. You're like, huh?
Yeah.
Not Abraham Lincoln. There's those other guys. Arthur St. Clair. There's other guys. I don't even, you never heard of them again, right? Why are they promoted up? Well, because they happen to come from the right state. So he gives them a promotion, but he gives it the date being February 17th, 1776. So he's actually 2 days seniority over these guys. Well, he's corresponding with George Washington now in the hospital in Albany. This is October, right? October 19th was the battle, or October 7th was the battle. He's down there. He was in the hospital from October all the way to May of 1778 because he got shot in his ankle, right? You know how many bones are in your ankles? A lot of bones. They didn't amputate. That's the second wound he's had, but they didn't amputate his leg. They didn't do a lot of that back then. And he writes Washington saying, he asked him how he's doing, Washington does, and he said, well, they didn't close it, and the bone fragments keep coming out and out. Well, eventually he knows he was a brigadier general, he was a leader of men in a battle, right? So he wanted to lead men on horseback, on into battle. He did it great. He knows now that's never going to happen again. So he thinks. So George Washington does what with him?
Command of West Point.
What's that?
Command of West Point.
Yeah. Before that, he sent him to Philadelphia
Oh.
to be like kind of like a governor pro temp of Philadelphia, which is a pencil job. He's sitting at a desk. Who works out? So who likes to work outside and does things? Always. I work outside. If I had to sit at a desk, and I've done jobs where I've had to sit at it is not what I want to do. It drives me nuts. I'll do it because I have to, but he did not like it. He wants to be out on the field, out in the leading men, giving orders, not pencil whipping this. Oh, boy, you need 300 more sheets. Oh, great, Not him. So he gets disgruntled. And this is a whole start of another thing, which I'm not going to even get into that. But him and George Washington were such close friends that in a place called Tappan, New York, you ever been there? 76 house. There was a picture of Benedict Arnold. Well, what does this have to do with anything? Well, that's where John Andre was hung in Tappan. John Andre was the man who Benedict Arnold met on the Hudson River, right in Tarrytown, New York, Sleepy Hollow. There's a monument there. This is where they met, and this is where he talked about, I'm giving you the plans for West Point. Well, John Andre got caught. Benedict Arnold got on a ship. So Andre gets caught in Japan, they hang him. How old do you think John Andre was? Talk about youth.
Yeah.
21 years old. giving his life for his country. Didn't fight. He said it. He was honored, and it's weird the way things he said when he was going to get on. I'm honored to die for my. This time instead of a 21-year-old today would be crying in their soup and where's my rights? So the Japan House had a picture of Benedict Arnold, and Washington visited there, and he went there. He turned his picture of Benedict Arnold upside down, and they say it's been cleaned up, but that picture's still there, but it's still upside down. That broke his heart. So you fast forward to 1780. Benedict Arnold does what? Goes and joins the British. Now remember I said he'd never leave men on the field again? He did leave men on the field. He led the British men on the field. Ever heard of Richmond, Virginia? What is that notorious for? You don't think of it in the Revolutionary War. That's Civil War, right? Richmond, capital of the Confederacy. Talked about earlier, Petersburg, But Benedict Arnold burned Richmond, Virginia, because Thomas Jefferson wanted to use that for his men in his headquarters. But Benedict Arnold knew they were coming, and he burned it down. See, government is the same from 1777 till 2026. There were men in that army who hated John Adams. He had bad things to say about pretty much everybody. He'd write Abigail saying, I wish, Governor Clinton Sullivan expedition came right through here, right? Clinton was the 5th guy picked for that expedition. Oh, man. He got captured because he was surrounded in Germantown. They took him captive, and he said to his wife, I wish they'd have killed him. So Benedict Arnold has his detractors long before he became a traitor, and that's a lot of the reason he got delayed from being promoted. There was always backbiting. Everybody was looking to get ahead, to better themselves. Speaking of that, you see my outfit here? Very nice. This is a hunter shirt. If you get a chance, and they haven't blown over yet, which I'm shocked, the wind has stopped. The last one here is Daniel Morgan. Morgan had riflemen at the Battle of Saratoga. Now, they were requested by Philip Schuyler, who Schuylerville is named after, who was actually the commander of the Northern Army to begin with, but because of letting Ticonderoga fall so easily, Burgoyne, they relieved him of his command, thinking, you might be a little bit on the traitor side of you. But the reason we let it go is there was hardly any men there. Washington had pulled all the men out of Ticonderoga, except for a few, because they needed them elsewhere. So there was hardly any people there to fight. Schuyler's like, I'm not going to sacrifice these guys, and knowing we're going to get overwhelmed anyways, we can use them. So he kind of basically left. Well, Horatio Gates takes over. But before Schuyler left, he requested riflemen. Because what do they use in the north, in New York, in New England?
Smoothbore.
Muskets.
Smoothbore.
Right? A ball, smoothbore, musket. Basically shoots out the barrel, drops off 2 feet 8 after. It's got a pretty good range, but not very accurate. Not as much range as the rifleman. Rifle bullet, has the lines in the barrel. When it comes out, it's much more accurate, much more accuracy, and much more distance. So Schuyler requested these men, and Morgan finally got sent up with his 400 riflemen. And this is what they were, with hunting crops. But what happened is, you think of who was killed at the Battle of Saratoga, the second battle. If you think of who was the man that was killed, one of the generals on the British side.
Fraser.
Simon Fraser. What ethnic group was he?
Scottish.
Great Scotsman. He was one of only 2 British generals killed during the entire Revolutionary War. You don't know who the second one is, do you? It wasn't John Burgoyne. It wasn't. I can't think of anything. No, it was John Agnew. You know him, right? Spiro Agnew, remember, Vice President years ago? Agnew. John Agnew was killed at the Battle of Germantown. But those were the only 2 generals on the British side that were killed during the entire war. Now, I don't know, probably. Wouldn't surprise me. Benjamin Lincoln, no relation to the kind of state, no. Oh. Who?
Abraham Lincoln.
Oh.
Was he related to the?
To Benjamin Lincoln? No. I mean, maybe by a shirt tail, but no direct.
No genealogy will surprise you.
Well, you might find he's a shirt tail cousin. I wouldn't guess. Now, I heard somebody we were talking earlier about Timothy Murphy. Who's heard of Timothy Murphy here? Timothy Murphy was one of Morgan's riflemen. He lived over in the Schoharie Valley toward the end of his life. He's buried in Schoharie. He was the one that everybody, of course, in Schoharie Valley, you want to have the local guy, He's the one that killed Simon Fraser. Of course, he asked Joe Schmo over here. He's the one that I killed him. Every one of Morgan's riflemen, I'm the guy that got him. They don't know, because what they do, this rifleman would go up in trees. And it was a kind of an unwritten thing at that point. You don't shoot the officers. Tough noogies. When it comes to our freedom, we're going to get whoever is leading this army, we're going to put him into disarray, and they shot him. So we don't know who shot Simon Fraser. Could have been Timothy Murphy, or who knows who. But You spoiled the ending for her. Where is she? She's way in the back. She's hiding, see? Turning point of the American Revolution. Why? Because the British surrendered? Well, that could be, but that's not really why. I mean, it's the first time in history, but that didn't really change a whole lot because. But there was a certain country who decided, hey, and they've been supplying. They're actually cannons. Don't tell anybody. Cannons, 2 cannons at the Battle of Saratoga, given to us by the French that we used against the British before they formally came and allied with us. So France decided to, okay, these patriots might be a bunch of farmers, might be a bunch of, whatever, backcountry folks, but they ain't got a chance to beat the British. And you know how much of a great relationship the French had with the British, right? They loved each other. So anytime they had a chance to beat up on it, oh yeah, you're fighting now? Okay, come on, we're on your side. I don't care if I like you or not, but you got a common enemy. We're fighting you against the British, fighting with you. So the French came over and they had just one guy, remember him?
Lafayette.
Well, okay, they had 2 guys.
Oh.
I love saying that too. Don't go down the southern part. Yeah, Lafayette. Young guy, wealthy guy. He was wealthier than the king of France. But he inherited all the money. He had no family, no parents. He came over in his nice 50 uniform and watching. He's like, oh great, some other guy coming and wants a uniform and a paycheck. He came and you know what he did. Rochambeau was down the south. But remember in 1825, Lafayette came back and did his farewell tour. He was an older man then. And you go around New York City and mark it, Lafayette farewell tour. He went here, he was all over the place. But then, not just the French, but who else joined? The Spanish. Spanish are one of those groups that hardly anybody believes, had any kind of influence in the American Revolution. But there was a lot of great leaders from Spain that came and fought for the Revolutionary War. Now back to France. You hear them, they were America's first allies. You hear that, right? False. Who was America's first allies? Or who were?
Native.
Which ones?
Oneida.
Oneida Indians were the first allies of the American patriots. Yes, at the Battle of Oriskany, under a guy named Conyers and his wife, 2 kettles together. They fought with about 300 men from Saratoga group. They had about 50 guys that came to Oriska, which Oriskany is the place of the nettles. But these guys fought. Wait a minute. Who's on the other side? Mohawk. Seneca's fighting with the British. This guy, I think, what the heck's his name? Joseph Brant. You've heard of him, right? Tiondenaga was fighting for the British at the Battle of Oriskany. You have the Oneidas and the Mohawk fighting against each other for the first time. Any of the 6 nations ever fought against one another since the peacemaker came. They fought, and that was basically the end of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy there. After that, they were not united like this. Now, each individual nation still exists today, but they're not like they used to be. So the Oneida Indian Nation, America's first allies, they tout that. They want to be in Washington at Valley Forge. The Oneidas came down and brought them food, showed them, remember Polly Cooper, showed them how to cook the corn, how to do it without killing yourself. So anyway, I could go on and on here, but like I said, I'll be here till 5 o'clock, so I don't get paid by the hour, do I? No. But anyway, so if there's any questions, I'd be happy to make something up. I haven't already. No, and I do say, when you go look, research, study, get involved, and look up stuff. If go to these places. They're all really local. But any questions? Yeah.
St. Clair guy, where is he from? What's his first name?
Arthur St. Clair.
Okay, and where was he from exactly?
Probably New Hampshire.
New Hampshire.
He was the second in command under Schuyler at Ticonderoga. And the funny thing with Benedict Arnold, when St. Clair and Schuyler were relieved, Benedict Arnold inherited Schuyler's men, his adjutants, which is another reason that they say that Horatio Gates didn't like him, because Horatio Gates and Philip Schuyler did not like one another. So there's this rift between them. And not to say they were best friends, but there wasn't this hatred that he put him in a tent, told him, sit still and don't come bugging me anymore. It wasn't that extreme. Yeah, St. Clair. And then there was Barry St. Ledger, who was the one who came from up north and came into the siege at Fort Stanwix. Just to show you, this is Arthur St. Clair here.
Okay.
Now you notice something about each one of these individuals. When they had their photograph taken, they never smiled during the Revolutionary War.
Bad teeth.
No cameras! I say it all the time, photographs, they didn't smile and they're, oh yeah, no, they didn't. Yeah. Sorry. Yes, sir.
I wanna go back, didn't, Ethan Allen and his Green Mountain Boys mix it up with people actually fighting against
Yes.
New Yorkers?
Before the Revolutionary War, that's how they were called originally the Bennington Mob.
The Bennington-
So if that tells you a little bit. And Benedict Arnold and Ethan Allen, remember they took
Yeah.
Ticonderoga together, but they were not co-leaders and they did not like each other. And when Ethan Allen wrote his reports, he didn't make a mention of Benedict Arnold getting wounded or anything. They did not like each other.
Excuse me?
Yes.
The Green Mountain Boys, what's there? Supposedly that, the lady my grandfather, what's the, tell me a little bit about them.
Because what I talked about with the New Hampshire grants, New York thought that was their land.
Oh,
New Hampshire thought it was their land, and it was a mess because the New Hampshirites built their houses there, and then New Yorkers, they call them Yorkies, came in and said, "Get out of here! This is our land." This is King George, and now wait a minute. So Ethan Allen, his brother Ira Allen,
yeah?
for the Bennington Mob. Now Bennington's only over the border from New York State now, so it's close. But they were called the Bennington Mob because they didn't mess around. They did not like New York. And to this day, you ask a New Hampshirite or a Vermonter, yeah, you New Yorkers will tolerate you, but we're still 250 years later. Yeah, you still got to get, there's a little bit of, because of the genealogy. My great-great-grandfather was one of the Green Mountain Boys, New Yorkers. They're a bunch of things, So, same thing with the Oneidas and the Mohawks fighting one another. We know a Mohawk lady up at the Iroquois Museum. She says there's still animosity between the Mohawks and the Oneidas. Now, the Mohawk and the Senecas were fine because they were on the same side, but the Oneidas were looked at as, you guys are traitors. And I could go into that, and I'm not gonna, but the reason they decided to side with the Americans is because of the land thing and done at Fort Stanwix Treaty in 1768, and why the Oneidas decided to side with us and the other ones didn't. And so but, yes. So yeah, Ethan Allen was a bully. But, hey, they're taking our land that was promised to us. So, any other questions? No.
Didn't Connecticut own, like the northern tier of what is now Pennsylvania?
Yes, you look on old maps, yeah. Yeah, the weird maps. These are southern New York and weird, yeah. So I can answer questions afterwards, but I don't hold anybody up from leaving here, so thank you for coming. I appreciate you having me, not going to the I do encourage you, yes, take a look at the boards and there are stuff up here if you want.
I got 2 fourth great grandfathers buried in deposit of Patriots.
Look at all these people. Oh, really?
Yeah, Nicholas Weaver, he was with that Tryon County militia.